Ahoy there. Today on the Red Sea, what is your favorite history is stranger than fiction fact? What always sticks in my head is the Christmas truce of 1914. It's a well-known story, but that does not make it any less strange that soldiers who had been fighting for months independently decided, on both sides, to effectively have a ceasefire on Christmas and even mingle with the enemy on Christmas Day, exchanging gifts and sharing food. If you had written it in a book and there was no precedent, it'd be an implausible plot point. But there it was. My favorite part of the story is that after all the drinking and having fun, socializing, soldiers were actually becoming friends. English soldiers got their gifts from their families in form of cookies and such stuff and they shared it with their enemies. But Germans did not have gifts for their newly found friends. So one German soldier took a pistol and shot an English soldier's finger off. English guy was mad at first, but then he realized that his friend gave him the greatest gift a person can be given at those times, a military discharge. The entire Taiping Rebellion, a war started by a Chinese peasant who dreamed and believed he was Jesus' younger brother. Although poor, the first thing he did was have a giant demon-slaying sword forged, took over a city, asked the British why they would not pay him tribute as the new head of their faith, engaged in total war with the king, applied pseudo-communist policies like abolishing private property, separated women and men from ever interacting, and sent the women to the front lines. Over 20 million people died, with some estimates as high as 40 million. I did a research paper on them. My professor thought I was making shite up. The time Liechtenstein invaded Italy with an army of 80 soldiers and returned with 81. Roman Emperor Caligula once marched his entire army towards the English Channel in an effort to invade Britain. Upon arrival to the Channel, he decided that he no longer wished to invade Britain, so he ordered his men to collect seashells before heading home. Mine comes from the Civil War. The first battle of the Civil War took place at Bull Run on Wilmer McLean's farm. Fed up with the war, and for the protection of his family he moved 120 miles away to Appomattox Courthouse, Virginia. On April 9, 1865 a messenger knocked on his door to ask if they could use his house to negotiate the conditions of the South's surrender. The war started in his backyard and ended in his parlor. Napoleon faced his greatest defeat, not at the hands of the Duke of Wellington's army at Waterloo, but at the hands of bunny rabbits. It was a fine summer in 1807. Napoleon was in high spirits having signed the Peace of Tilsit, and to celebrate, Napoleon suggested that the imperial court should enjoy a lavish rabbit hunt, organized by his trusted chief of staff, Alexander Berthier. Berthier was so keen to impress that he had bought hundreds of rabbits to ensure that the imperial court had plenty to shoot at. Satisfied that nothing could possibly go wrong, Berthier waited calmly for the guests to take their position. The shoot commenced, and the rabbits were released by the gamekeepers. But disaster struck. Instead of scattering in all directions, the horde of rabbits suddenly turned and charged on Napoleon. Confronted by this flood of rabbits, the emperor's escort formed a skirmish line to protect him. But, in the words of historian David Chandler, with a finer understanding of Napoleonic strategy than most of his generals, the rabbit horde divided into two wings and poured around the flanks of the party. As the emperor fled to the relative safety of his coach, the rabbits pursued, some allegedly even leaping into it, so that he had to lend a hand in ejecting them even as his coachmen whipped up their horses. In the aftermath, it transpired that Berthier, despite all his attention to detail, had procured not wild rabbits, but domesticated ones. Thus, when they espied the emperor and his coach coming towards them, they thought he was their keeper bringing good things to eat and acted accordingly. At the First Ecumenical Council at Nicaea, the Bishop of Smyrna, who would later be known as Good Old Street, Nicholas, became so enraged with Arius, who preached a doctrine that did not believe in the Holy Trinity. He punched him in the face and knocked him to the ground in the council hall. He was then thrown in prison by Emperor Constantine, and only freed after his fellow bishops has visions of Jesus demanding it. Ernest Hemingway was once in a plane crash in Africa. The entire crew and passengers were considered dead and newspapers the world over printed obituaries for him. A day later he and a few of the other survivors walked out of the jungle and were put on a plane to be flown out for medical attention. That plane crashed shortly after to Kiev and caught fire, at which point Papa broke out the windows in the cabin with his head and everyone on board escaped. He also won 2 military medals in his life, one from Italy and one from the US, and he never once picked up a gun in battle. After the British burned the White House during the War of 1812, DC got hit with a hurricane and a tornado at the same time.
Someone got bored playing SimCity 1800.
The story of Tycho Brahe, who was basically kidnapped by his uncle and his parents did not really care. He later lost his nose in a sword duel with another nobleman. The duel was over a disagreement about a mathematical formula. Tycho made a replacement metal false nose which was possibly gold/silver. He also had a pet elk which got drunk, fell down the stairs and died. Plus he basically had a psychic dwarf who stay under the table at banquets. Brahe supposedly died after he refused to go to the toilet at a banquet as it would be improper, leading to kidney/bladder problems. In 1504, a German imperial knight lost his hand to a cannon shot which forced his sword against him. He lived. Pretty amazing for that time. And instead of, stopping with fighting and living the rest of his life in peace, he had an iron hand forged. Let me repeat that. This Methodica had an iron hand prosthetic over 500 years ago. He continued fighting for 40 years, after which he chilled in the castle of Hornburg for his final years. His name was Gods of the Iron Hand, and the hand itself is still at display. In the 1600s, prices of tulip bulbs in the Netherlands were so high that they cost the same as a house. People saw that the prices were rising, so they decided to invest in tulips. So prices continued to rise. When the highest price bulb failed to sell, it caused a massive crash in prices. This is one of the first examples of financial bubble. Awahi is the older spelling of Hawaii, and there is a river in the remote high desert of eastern Oregon called the Awahi River because it was first explored in 1819 by some Hawaiians. The Russian intelligence agency, GRU, after WWII began a program to blackmail American servicemen into betraying their country. Basically, they opened up gay bars near military bases. In one sense the program was a failure, since most gay servicemen chose to come out of the closet and betray their country. But in another sense the program was a raging success. Turns out that gay bars were very profitable. A good way of providing the GRU with much needed foreign currency. So, of course, the KGB, the GRU's sister/rival organization, wanted in on the action. So from the 1960s through to the 1990s almost all American military bases had two Russian-run gay bars nearby, and they were always on the off-limits list given to servicemen. They were not generating any useful intelligence, but nobody in the crew and KGB cared because they were cash cows. Since the KGB was there to make money and did not give a damn about American laws anyway, they also became major players in the drug trafficking trade. The crew-run bars seem to have stayed out of this. Then when the Soviet Union collapsed and the KGB was disbanded. The former KGB agents involved in the gay base and drug trafficking operations became the core group of the new Russian mafia. Rasputin's death. Poisoned, but did not die. So he went after the guys who poisoned him, and they stabbed him. Still did not die. Kept going after the assassins. So they shot him, and though they finished him, his eyes open, and he lunges for one of the assassins to strangle him. So they shoot him some more. This time he starts to crawl away. They beat the duck out of him, tie him up, throw him in a sack, and throw the sack into the river. 2 days later the sack was recovered, and it looked like Rasputin almost escaped his bindings and clawed out of the bag. On top of it all, while his body was being burned, the tendons shrunk, and he sat up in the fire. Simo Häyhä. He was a Finnish sniper during the Winter War, 1939-1940, with Russia. He stood only 53, and was only active for about 100 days of the war, but he worked in temperatures that almost never rose above 20 degrees Celsius, and often fell to 40 degrees. At this point, he was 20 years old, and had only about a year of military experience, none of which involved actual combat. He killed between 505 to 712 Red Army soldiers during the war. Differs in different sources, using only a bolt-action rifle, iron sights, no scope, and possibly a Russian submachine gun. He was called the White Death by the Red Army, due to his homemade, camouflaged outfit that helped him blend in with the snows. The Russians tried various tactics to kill him, including counter-snipers and artillery bombardments that leveled the forest in which he was hiding. Eventually, however, a Russian soldier was able to hit him in the face with a round with an explosive charge. I'm not sure if that's accurate. As to my knowledge, nothing of that sort existed at that point. Said shot blew off most of his left cheek. Napoleon, what a ducking guy, decides that he wants to be emperor, and does it. The best moment is when he took the crown out of the Pope's hands to crown himself emperor, so that no one would be above his authority. That actually ducking happened. This dude was unreal. A luxury liner embarks on her first voyage with much fanfare, only to hit an iceberg and capsize. Sound familiar? But this isn't an account of the RMS Titanic. This is the plot of The Wreck of the Titan, a novella written by Morgan Robertson. Wreck was published in 1898, more than a decade before the real-life wreck of the Titanic. The similarities between the fictional and the real life are astounding. Both were considered glorious feats of modern engineering, were touted as being practically unsinkable, contained less than half the number of lifeboats required, and were struck by icebergs on their starboard side, taking half of their passengers' lives. Finally, both the Titan and the Titanic sank in the North Atlantic Ocean on a night in April. Lincoln once got into a duel with one of his political opponents over some bullshit. Since the guy challenged Lincoln got to pick the weapon. The weapon he chose, broadswords. You see, Lincoln did not really want to kill the guy, so he first tried to reason with him. When his opponent refused, Lincoln started to warm up his swings and swung at a tree branch way overhead and lobbed it off in one stroke. It became apparent that Lincoln had a massive reach advantage on the guy, so his opponent yielded and he too made peace. Tiberius, the second Roman emperor, was an absolute nutter. In his retirement to Capri, he saw two young boys that he liked the look of. One was something like 7, the other around 13ish. He asked his mother if he could leave the banquet to have smash with them. She said something along the lines of eat your dinner first. So he speedily finished a Roman banquet and proceeded to break the two boys' legs and rape them. This is the same emperor who got so scared by a fish that a local fisherman presented to him that he scaled a cliff and ordered guards to rub the scaly fish into the fisherman's face until he bled. Read anything about George Washington in the Revolutionary War. Either he is the luckiest man to walk this earth, or he was a demigod sent to create America. Vlad the Impaler would impale his enemies on lances and leave them alive/dying all around his castle grounds as a statement to his people and would-be enemies. A lot more about Vlad Tepes III. Very interesting read. Caligula appointing his favorite horse as part of the consul. Classic Caligula. If you are reading this, you watched until the end of the video. Smash that like button if you have enjoyed it. Bam. On screen there should be some more videos similar to this. So either go do something else or watch more videos. That's about it. There is no more here. What are you waiting for, a secret message or something? This is not a secret, but subscribe for more videos like this.